You are watching The New American Media.
You are listening to The New American Media.
Gotta love the quick station identification break. So, once again, thank you for sticking around with us if you're listening in real time. That only took a matter of seconds, and if you're listening after the fact, thank you. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/The New American Media, and follow us on Twitter at American_media_. We are back with lifelong Cleveland sports fan and NBA scout Zak Baris. You can follow Zak on Twitter at ZBaris. That's ZBARIS. Zak, Mike Brown was fired 5 games into this season. It kind of reminded me of the Charlie Frye thing, where Charlie Frye had about 2 quarters to be the starter, and then they benched him, and then they traded him. That
was the best thing that could have ever happened for the Browns of that year. Nobody knew what Cornell was doing, but the Browns went 10-6 because of that, so I'm okay with that one. But getting back to the Mike Brown firing, I understand that he was fired, but I just don't understand the timing. Fire him before the season starts, fire him 10 more games into the season. It makes sense. If this team's sitting there at 3.
Oh, did you? It looks like your app has finished downloading. In the previous segment, Zak gave us a heads up and said, hey, if my call drops, I just downloaded something. So let me go ahead and get Zak back on the line. Gotta love live radio.
Your call has been forwarded to an automated...
Fantastic. So let me riff on this for a second. Mike Brown was the Cavaliers head coach during the LeBron James years. Mike Brown failed to bring home a championship despite the fact that the Cleveland Cavs had the best record in the NBA back-to-back seasons and the back-to-back MVP of the league. And so Mike Brown leaves, takes a little bit of time away, and ends up coaching the Lakers. Now he's fired 5 games into this season. I think he was 0-8 in the preseason this year. Excuse me. And I think he was, 1-5? 1-5 on the season this year, and they fire him. So it kind of has me thinking. It has me thinking about how we put it into perspective what the problem was. The Lakers 1-4 this season. What the problem with the Cavaliers was. Was it LeBron James? Was it the coach? Was it the supporting cast? Was it just that we ran up against some buzzsaws at the wrong time? And Los Angeles apparently saw enough. After 5 games, got rid of him. 1-4 Laker team, lots of injuries. They get rid of Mike Brown. And I'm not certain that's a good move. I'm not certain that's a bad move. Let me see what Zak thinks.
Call has been forwarded to an automated voice messaging system.
Okay, so that's not going to happen. We'll keep going here for a second, though, because Mike Brown, I don't know. You can say that he did get a good chance. He did have the opportunity to make something happen, and some could say that he didn't get enough of an opportunity. 1-4 start. He's 1-4. Is it the kiss of death for Dwight Howard? Is Dwight Howard capable of doing this to coaches? I mean, he did it over in Orlando. Oh, I don't know. This is Kobe's team, though. I mean, they might just be renting Dwight Howard for a year. So if they're renting Dwight Howard, maybe it's not his fault. Maybe it's Kobe that wanted him gone. But it's like Zak was starting to say, why would you do it 5 games into the season? Out of all things, why would you do it now? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. If you're going to can him in the offseason and figure it out. Let him latch on with another team. Get some cohesion on your team. And Steve Nash has been injured, and Dwight Howard's coming off of an injury, and, I guess Antoine Jameson's just looking old. But it's a curious move. It's a curious move. Lakers general Mitch Kupchak. The bottom line is that the team is not winning at the pace that we expected this team to win, and we didn't see improvement. We wish Mike well. We're sorry it ended this way, so we've decided to move in another direction and make a change. What? 5 games in? Come on! You remember the Miami Heat were going through this too? And would they start off 7-9 or 9-7, 9-8, or barely a 500 team? It's really wacky. It's really wacky to think about. And Steve Nash hasn't been there. And maybe Mike Brown isn't an offensive coach. Maybe he doesn't really have what it takes to be an NBA offensive. He's a defensive guy. He's a studying film kind of guy. And Mike Brown is good at breaking teams down defensively, but even the Lakers' defense hasn't been good this year. Let's try again. See what Zach thinks.
Call has been forwarded to.
We're trying. We'll see if he comes back on once he does that hard reset on his brand new iPhone 5. By the way, we are not sponsored by iPhone 5. Hey, speaking of sponsors, we're getting ready to go on a sponsor blitz and start picking up some clients. Just wanted to say, on a completely unrelated, slightly, it's from the state of California. California had the chance to go for Proposition 37 back on Tuesday, which was to label genetically modified foods. We are not sponsored by Trader Joe's, but I just wanted to let people know, since Prop 37 was defeated out here in California. Well, that's a stretch, bringing this into a sports show just because I'm talking about the Los Angeles Lakers. But we'll say that Trader Joe's, all of the food marked Trader Joe's are GMO-free. So if you don't want genetically modified foods, you can get anything that says Trader Joe's on it, and their brand of food does not have that. But back to Mike Brown. Mike Brown's gone. Really, Charlie Frye came in as the starter for the Cleveland Browns. He lasted a couple of quarters, and he was canned. He was sacked quick. And then they traded him right away after that. And it's like, you went through the whole offseason, you went through the whole preseason, and you picked this guy to be your starter, and you dump him a week or two into the season. You know, that doesn't really bode well for the organization. Because if you were going to fire him after 5 games, why didn't you fire him in the offseason? It really doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It's a curious move. Will it pay dividends? I don't know. Did they need to get Mike D'Antoni? Did they want to go after Phil Jackson again? I don't know. I'm interested to get Zach's thoughts.
A call has been forwarded to an automated.
And it seems like I'm not going to be able to do that now. But in all fairness, Zach did warn us that this was about to happen. So the Los Angeles Lakers are trying to get things figured out. I don't know. Who were they going to go to? They're going to go to Brian Shaw? Rick Adelman? Shaw is an assistant in Indiana. Adelman is a former assistant in Minnesota. So they're saying it's not going to take long. Reports out of ESPN Los Angeles, Dave McMenamin, that this isn't going to take long. Well, there's not a lot of time to mess around. This season, they got to make a run for a championship. They don't have the luxury of time. They're not young. Steve Nash is not young. Dwight Howard is only signed up for 1 year. Brown, though, in its second year of a 4-year, $18 million contract. The final year of that contract was only partially guaranteed. Yeah, but that is harsh. Kobe Bryant playing through a foot injury. This is just really curious. It's curious to figure out what direction they're headed in. It's a lot like the Cleveland Browns because Pat Shurmur's just not getting it done. Here, let's go ahead and. Hey, I'm trying to switch over. Yeah, we're trying to take the call. Yeah, thank you for checking out live radio, everybody. Okay, fantastic. Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to take that call. That just did not work. Yeah, that was really strange. We couldn't switch over in the studio to pick up the call, so let's try to bring it back this way. Could see the call coming in. That was really bizarre. Oh well.
Hello.
Hey, Zach. So we'll just chalk that up to internet gremlins and the NSA, the Secret Service.
My phone updated itself. It was downloading the new software because it was plugged in, so
does not compute. No, it's all right. We were talking about Mike Brown, and I don't really understand the timing of it either, Zach.
So, yeah.
So where do the Lakers go from here? They get rid of him.
I honestly, I think it's going to be Phil Jackson or Jerry Sloan at this point.
Jackson
Mitch,
again.
Kupchak hinted this morning that it sounds like it's going to be a coach that was, was actually, that's not coaching right now. So it sounds like it's going to be. My guess is it's going to be Phil Jackson or Jerry Sloan.
What about Mike D'Antoni?
He's a possibility too. He's in there in the top three. As if this morning I said Sloan and D'Antoni were the ones likely to take over the job, and now I have this Phil Jackson thing in my mind that I can't get out.
Well, why did Phil Jackson leave in the first place? And why would he come back now? What has changed?
I think he was just exhausted from coaching. I think he was just done, and now I think he's looking at it going, I have a chance to win a championship with this team.
Okay, so
I think he's the Lakers' number one choice. I think 2 is Jerry Sloan. I think 3 is Mike D'Antoni.
You think Jerry Sloan has enough left in the tank? He was so consistent in Utah for so long.
As a guy it was like he never had a losing season.
Right.
I think he was so fed up with the whole Darren Williams situation, he just left.
Well, there's that. It kind of reminds me having all of those good years, kind of like the John Cooper syndrome with the Ohio State Buckeyes. You're good, but you can never bring home the championship. Close but no cigar. The constant bridesmaid, never the bride. But you're thinking it's going to be Phil Jackson, huh?
I think it's going to be Phil. Or Jerry, like I said, or Jerry Sloan. I think those are the 2 top choices here.
And do you think it was fair to judge this team? I guess 0-8 in the preseason is still 0-8, but it's.
I don't think Mike Brown's a good coach. Let's put it that way. I'm not a huge fan of him as a coach. I think he's a great defensive coach. I think his offensive schemes are just atrocious. I can't even. There is no offensive scheme in Mike Brown's system essentially. And now they're trying to sit there and run the Princeton offense. And Byron Scott system that didn't work. It hasn't worked. We're 5 games in the season. I think it's a little early. I can understand. I can barely understand if an NFL coach is 1-4 and gets fired. Let alone that's a 16-game season. We're talking 82 games here. I understand if he would have been fired before the season. It would have made a lot of sense. I would have completely understood it. But it's the fact that 5 games into a season, I don't think we've ever seen anything like this before. 5 games.
It just really speaks to me the strangeness. Charlie Frye gets 2 quarters and then he's gone. I know it worked out for the Browns at that time, trading for Derek Anderson. Swapping him out on the bench and then getting rid of him. But how do you pull your starter that made it through all of the offseason, through all of the OTAs, through all of your practices, all of your scrimmages, and then you give him 2 quarters? And then you're done with him, and then you trade him off of your team. How do the Lakers go this whole season? And
apparently, with the Browns, though, the thing is, it was neck and neck between, it was neck and neck. Apparently for Charlie Frye and Derek Anderson, and the Browns went with Anderson, instead, last minute. But I just don't believe for a second, though, that the Lakers had this in their mind all offseason, that Mike Brown was their coach. I think they've had doubts about him from the beginning. I think they wanted to see if the system was working. But obviously enough to watch for 8 games of the preseason was enough, and 5 games of the regular season. I honestly think the Buses were very nervous. But, this is their guy who they went out and hired a year ago.
Right.
This is a guy who coached 66 regular season games last year. They had a better record than they did the year before, and they didn't have Odom last year, or I think they had the same record, or they were very similar, or not the same record, I'm sorry, because it was a 66-game season. But, they wound up making it just as far in the second round. They actually made it further last year, in 12 playoff games. The first series went to 7, and then the second time, they lost in 5 to a much better Oklahoma City team. The year before, they lost to a Dallas team in 4. So they made it further last year than they did. And I think the team was a lot worse last year than they were the year before, talent-wise.
Well,
and they still made it further last year. That's why I was just surprised to see it happen. But obviously, this had to definitely go through Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant definitely had a say in this, definitely. And I think Dwight Howard did too. You have to look at this point. Dwight Howard's a free agent. We haven't re-signed him yet. If we have a miserable season here and he opts not to re-sign, we just lost Andrew Bynum for him.
And you just rented him.
And that's all you're looking at it that way too.
That's all Lakers are doing. They're renting him, and there's questions out there. Does Dwight Howard bring the kiss of death to coaches? And what is he looking for? He gets rid of Van Gundy, and Mike Brown's out. Do you think Brown had enough of a chance to work with? I mean, Steve Nash has been injured, and Dwight Howard.
I don't think
rehabbing.
so, but, obviously the Lakers felt differently. I just wouldn't fire a coach. If I was that confident in my coach to begin with after a year, like I said, if I didn't like him after a year, I would have fired him after a year. I wouldn't have kept him on for 5 games of the next season. Now you have to bring in a whole new coach. It's going to take plenty of time to implement a system with the new team. Jerry Sloan hasn't coached any of these guys if he comes in. Phil Jackson has his work to do. He's never coached Dwight Howard. He's never coached Steve Nash. I think D'Antonio would be a great fit for this team because, Nash would know the offense instantly. But, like I said, this is a team that's normally running isolation plays, and suddenly, and Kobe Bryant's never been a pick-and-roll player, and suddenly he's being thrown in the pick-and-roll with Steve Nash. That's the type of point guard Steve Nash is. And same with Dwight Howard at the center position. It is a totally different outlook now for Gasol and Kobe. They're playing with 2 guys who are used to 2 totally different systems. Not everything gels right away. I mean, look, what if the Miami Heat would have fired Eric Spoelstra after 17 games? They were 9-8.
Yeah, that's what I was just saying. When
they went on to the championship that year and lost in 6, and the next year they won in 5. That's why I think it takes time. I think Spoelstra's a much better coach than Mike Brown, but still, I think Spoelstra, everybody's, he's going to be fired. He's not the right coach for them. It takes time to put a system together.
Well,
I think they just jumped the gun. I really do. I'm not saying Brown was the answer. I don't think he was. But I'm still saying is I think they just did this too early or they did it too late.
Either way, this was
not
exactly
this is a
right.
Horrible time to fire a coach. Let's say you bring in Jerry Sloan now, and it takes him 35 games to implement a system, and this team's sitting there, with 16 wins after 45 games or 44 games. It's possible it can happen. With a new coach. Like I said, this stuff does not happen overnight. When a guy gets traded in football, he does not learn the playbook overnight. Baseball is an easy game to adjust because you don't have to adjust. There's no playbook. You just go out there and hit and you field. It's a lot different. That's why baseball players have no time adjusting in trades. That's why in basketball, a lot of times you see, it's like the Cavaliers 2 years ago, acquired Antoine Jameson, and all of a sudden Shaq goes down. You never saw them play together, until the playoffs. And it was horrible putting them in together at the same time because the flow was just horrible because they had no time meshing with each other. It takes time for guys to learn a system and to learn to play with each other. It even happened for LeBron and Dwayne Wade. It took them over a full year for it to actually work.
But on the same token, you're not saying that this was a bad move to get rid of Brown.
I'm not saying it's a bad move.
It's curious timing.
The timing is terrible.
So Steve Nash, when are we expecting him back?
I don't know what his ETA. I don't know is when he's supposed to be back yet. I really don't. I mean, it's a bone bruise, knee contusion. It's basically, especially you never know with a 40-year-old point guard when he's going to be able to recover. It could be 3 days. It could be 2 weeks.
Exactly.
3 weeks. You don't know.
But they're on borrowed time. Kobe's getting old. He played in the Olympics again. He's tired. You got Dwight coming off of back surgery. You got an old Steve Nash. This is a team where you don't have time to stand around. You don't have time to dig yourself a hole. Although it's the NBA, and you can get into the playoffs with a pretty weak record. But I guess it's tougher in the Western Conference, and it's probably going to be that way this year. What do you think? It's 6, 7, 8 seeds. What do you think the records are going to be? How many wins in the Western Conference would it take to get in?
I think it's going to take around at least 44 to 45 to get in, at least.
Do you think
That's
Lakers...
a really, really strong conference. I mean, listen, you have teams like, you're looking right now an 8-seed team. I'm glad I put Dallas in the playoffs. I'm not glad I put them at the 7th seed because they're dominating right now. But I know plenty of analysts that said Dallas was going to have a horrible season. I did not sit there. I like the rejuvenated Dallas Mavericks. I was worried about Dirk's injury, though, at the beginning and how well they would do. But like I said, I just couldn't leave Dallas out of the playoffs sitting there. This is a team that's 2 years removed from the title, and they still have Dirk, who's still a good player. And they added a lot of talent in the offseason. But like I said, I don't know what it's going to take to get in because, like I said, my reshuffled Western Conference after the James Harden trade, I now have San Antonio at 1, Oklahoma City at 2. I still have Denver up there, the Clippers, and the Lakers. But, I want to see what the Lakers do over the next couple of weeks because, honestly, personally, I could care less if they go and miss the playoffs. Honestly, I'd be happy. I'd find it hilarious if this team went out and missed the playoffs. With all the money they're spending and all the money they have tied up, I think it would be hilarious.
So kind of like when the Yankees miss the playoffs, same deal.
Yeah, but the odds of it happening are just so low. There's 8 seeds in the playoffs. over 50% of the teams in the NBA make the playoffs. Don't forget that. Baseball, 4 teams from each league make the playoffs.
Do you think that the Lakers were on the verge of missing the playoffs the way that they started, or just way too early?
No, it's so early to tell. Don't forget is when you start going up and playing Western Conference finals, they still have 3 games left against the Clippers.
Right.
3 games left against the Warriors. I mean, maybe even 3 games left against the Warriors after tonight. Like I said, I would not be too worried about the Lakers yet. It's a cause for concern if they're sitting there at 4-15 in a couple of weeks. That's a hard hole to dig yourself out of. Considering some people are going, oh, this is a 72-win team.
No, you picked them. You picked them to win the whole thing.
I picked them as first in the Eastern Conference along with a lot of other people. I don't regret making that decision at this point. It's still very early on.
And they still could.
But I just don't think anybody's finished. I wish I would have just went with my gut and stuck San Antonio as the number 1 seed in the East, because they are the number 1 seed in the East. I mean in the West. I'm sorry, the West. The West. They're the number 1 seed in the West. There's no doubt in my mind they're the number 1 seed in the West. With the way they played, they will have the best record in the West. It doesn't mean it will translate into a title, but because they broke down earlier. But the West is weaker than it was last year, with teams like Oklahoma City not being as good as they were a year ago. The West has changed. I mean, Houston's now a borderline seed in the Western Conference. Omar Sheik's been great defensively. I mean, the Western Conference is definitely, from the week we talked to the James Harden trade, definitely the powers around the West have changed. I will tell you that right now. With Houston going from being maybe a 25-win team to suddenly being, a team that's going to win anywhere from 37 to 45 games.
I'm hearing the Rockets as being a potential place for Dwight Howard to end up, whether it's in the middle of this season or at the end of this season, to end up down
I don't
in
think
Houston.
It's going to happen in the middle of the season. I think the Lakers would be crazy to trade Dwight Howard for a prize asset. And who are they going to get for him? Omar Sheik? Sheik is not Dwight Howard. If anything, if Dwight Howard goes, it's going to be at the end of the season. And, just remember this, if for Laker fans listening, is when was the last big-time free agent to ever leave the Lakers? Shaq was traded. When was the last big-time free agent to ever leave the Lakers? It's never happened. A superstar's never left the Lakers in free agency. It just doesn't happen. The Lakers, as much as I have to say I don't like this move, but I assume the Bucks know what they're doing because they've been a first-class organization. They have 16 titles. They know what they're doing. That's why I have problems doubting what they did. I don't like the timing, but I have problems doubting the Bucks at any point because they've been so successful in running a team for so long. It's like you can't go there, you look at a business model sometimes, that's an odd change they made. I just don't know why they did it, and then suddenly it pays off a year later, You just have to take it in. You just have to take it in stride for right now and see what it is. But if they can bring back a rejuvenated Phil Jackson or a rejuvenated Jerry Sloan, or Mike D'Antoni would be a perfect fit with the system as long as Steve Nash and Dwight Howard are here. It's going to probably work. I just don't. Honestly, the best move for this team in the long run, may not have been going after Nash. Maybe it was going after someone else. But they went after Nash and did what they did. So they're going to live with that, and I think eventually things will work out for them. It's just going to take a big adjustment.
They have the talent.
And Mike Brown, obviously, they felt wasn't the answer. But like I said, I just don't like the timing. I don't mind that he was fired. It's just the timing that he was fired. Well, but I have problems feeling bad for Mike Brown because the guy's walking away with $15 million left on his deal.
Yeah, like Jesse Ventura getting paid by MSNBC to not do his job. You sign a nice contract, you get fired, and you sit back and collect pay to not work. Yeah, it's a hard time feeling bad for someone like that, for sure.
Exactly.
Well, let's do this. We're about exhausted on the NBA stuff. Any additional thoughts on anything else in the sports world? The Buckeyes, only undefeated team. You called that they could go 12-0.
I don't know what I'm going to do with myself this weekend. Buckeyes bye and the Browns have a bye. I know. I don't think this has ever happened.
So what do we do? What do we do this weekend? What in the world are we supposed to? I don't know. Maybe go out and experience nature. Go for a hike.
I will be attending a college basketball game tonight, so.
Yeah.
So I'm doing that tonight, and the rest of the weekend, like I said, it's tomorrow. I'm just going to watch college football. I don't have to sit there. I mean, I watch college football every Saturday, anyways. My life's essentially going to change in a week from now when college basketball definitely picks up, and I start traveling all the time. Then my life is going to change. But for right now, this is basically my last free weekend. Or next weekend kind of is too, for part of it. And, I'm going to see how it goes over the next couple of days, and just take it. I got Sunday ticket. I'll just be watching, tons of games, college basketball. We got the aircraft carrier game, with Ohio State playing this weekend.
I was just going to ask you about that.
It's going to be a fun weekend to watch some sports. I'm telling you, it'll be a great weekend.
What do you think about the Buckeyes basketball team?
I have to say they're a top 5 team in my opinion. Honestly, I think they're going to struggle a team without Jared Sullinger, but I think Deshaun Thomas takes a huge step forward without Sullinger there this year.
You think Sullinger might have been holding him back a little bit?
I don't think. Not a ton, but it's at the point where I think it's just there's going to be some excitement. You're going to get to see what some of the young guys can do on Ohio State's team. LaQuinton Ross. There's some guys I really like to see this year. And I think Ohio State basketball is a top 5 team. I think there were a lot of really, really good players last year. That left for the NBA, like Anthony Davis, Terrence Jones. You had a lot of Jared Sullinger. You had a ton of talented NBA players leave, for the NBA. And, I think this year it's different. Michigan's a top 5 team. There's 3 top teams in the Big Ten this year.
Who's the sleeper team?
3 of the top 5 teams in college basketball are in the Big Ten. Indiana's number 1. But players I expect to take, I really like Amir Williams this year. I think I really liked him when he did in limited time last year in the NCAA tournament. When Sullinger was getting into foul trouble, I really liked what he could do. I liked him. I think you're going to see a lot of him this year. Obviously a lot of Lenzel Smith. I expect big time improvement out of him. Shannon Scott, LaQuinton Ross. I'm excited to see what this Ohio State team can do this year, but they really had a very, very weak recruiting class going into this season. They lost out on guys like Tony Parker who went to UCLA. They just lost out on a lot of these guys they had hoped for, and it was really the first time you've seen Thad Matta fail at the, in recruiting. And last year was his first year he really did.
Well, this is a fun time of year. Get ready to get set for some college basketball action. Thinking back forward to March, it is a long way to March Madness. It's going to be a long college basketball season. It's nice to know the Buckeyes are at least a very strong team. Like you said, top 5. I think they're ranked number 4 right now. We'll see how it goes. So,
another thing I even wanted to bring up, too, is getting back to college football. When you look at it, there's a very good chance this season's going to wind up with 4 undefeated teams going into the national title game.
All from different regions?
Who do you leave out at this point? Obviously Alabama is not going to be left out of the national title game. I can tell you that. They're by far the best team in the country. Notre Dame, though, is Notre Dame. As much as I think Notre Dame can hold their own against Alabama. Granted, I think Alabama will win by at least a touchdown because Notre Dame won't be able to score, but Notre Dame's defense is elite. That'll be fun. I think that'd be a great game to watch, and I just don't see how Notre Dame gets left out of the title game because they're Notre Dame. But Kansas State, Colin Klein's phenomenal, and watching Oregon play is a treat every week. Last week was their first week where the defense was actually terrible and gave up 50 points, but otherwise the defense has been phenomenal for Oregon, and they've been blowing away teams in the first half every week.
Well, it'll be fun this year to be able to be an Ohio State fan and say, well, provided we can knock these final couple of games out of the way and say, hey, we're the number 1 team in the nation. Nobody could beat us. Prove that you can. And if we go undefeated, that would be at least a little bit of icing on the cake that you can't really take that away from us. And Urban Meyer's done a great job over there. So, Zach, we're about out of time for today, sir. Any final words on the way out the door?
Thank you again for having me on, even through my phone troubles. I appreciate it, as always.
Well, it's always good having you, Zach. Once again, this is Zak Baris, lifelong Cleveland sports fan and NBA scout. He's on Twitter at ZBaris. That's ZBaris. Go follow him there. All right, Zach, go have a good weekend. Enjoy watching your college football and
all right.
The Sunday ticket, and we'll catch up, who knows,
Thank
maybe
you.
even in a week. Take care, bud. That is Zak Baris, regular co-host during basketball season. And, man, feels like we just ended the basketball season. I feel like I've been talking basketball nonstop for like 3 years. With the off-season this year was the Olympics, so it never really stopped. But it's going to stop for now, and we're going to pause for a little bit, play a few songs, and we'll be back. We're going to talk getting word about Hillary Clinton resigning, General David Petraeus resigning, what's going on with Hurricane Sandy, and more. Join us in a moment on Agree to Disagree. Agree to Disagree. Yeah, it's a radio show we have on thenewamericanmedia.com every single Friday at 4:30 p.m. Pacific. Join the show. What do we talk about? Politics, religion, and spirituality. Basically anything you're not supposed to talk about in a bar.
You're not supposed to have these conversations inside of a bar, but we have them every single Friday at 4:30 p.m. Pacific on thenewamericanmedia.com. Join the show, offer your opinion, and let's agree to disagree, but let's have a good conversation.